Welcome to the Saturday Night Live Afterparty. This week, we'll be discussing Season 46, Episode 8 of SNL with host Timothée Chalamet and musical guest Bruce Springsteen and the E Street Band. I'm Catherine Coleman, and I am joined this week by John Murray, as well as New York-based sketch comedy writer Jason Wildhagen. You can connect with Jason on Instagram at Wildhagen Karate, and you can find us at snlpodcast.com. All right, here we go. So this week's episode had a strong first-time host, tons of airtime for our featured players, and maybe even an emerging comedy duo in Tim and Pete. And we'll have plenty to say about that in just a minute, but first, let's welcome Jason to the podcast.
Thank you.
Hi, Jason.
It's a pleasure to be here, guys. Thanks for having me.
I'm so happy to have you here. Jason's a old friend of mine from UCB, and he actually joined us over the summer to talk some vintage SNL. But for any of our listeners who weren't around in the off-season, Jason, why don't you tell us a little bit about your sketch cred and how on earth you are qualified to critique the institution that is SNL?
All right. Well, I've been writing sketch comedy since I moved to New York in 2017. I studied at UCB and the Magnet Theater and have written and performed for shows at both of those theaters. I'm currently a writer for a team called Give the Baby a Knife, which is a team in the Boogie Manja sketch comedy collective. We used to perform once a month at the People's Improv Theater in Manhattan, but since COVID, we've been putting shows online at Twitch TV/Boogie Manja. And I think that we're all, obviously looking forward to getting back into the theater eventually. But in the meantime, we've been able to, put up a lot of really funny video sketches. And we'll be doing so for the foreseeable future into 2021. In terms of how I'm qualified to critique Saturday Night Live episodes, I guess it's just years of practice. So long, history of watching SNL. The first casts that I remember really falling in love with as a kid, were, the Dana Carvey, Mike Myers, Chris Farley casts. And so, it's just fun to be able to talk about the show with you guys.
Very
For
good.
sure.
A man after my own heart. That was a good era for the show, and I think you're showing your age a little bit.
A little bit. You bring up like nostalgia for Dana Carvey, and
Yeah, Dana was my guy back in the day. I think maybe the only person that went to see Opportunity Knocks in the theater.
Well, real quick before we get into it, when's your next show with Give the Baby a Knife?
So the 2021 show schedule is still being worked out. We're taking a break over Christmas and New Year's, and we'll reconvene and start writing and putting together material in January. And the shows will resume in February. So if you follow Boogie Manja on Instagram at Boogie Manja at Give the Baby a Knife, you'll see information for our 2021 shows real soon, I hope.
Good stuff. All the shows have been great so far this season. I've really enjoyed watching. And let's get into SNL, huh?
Great, let's do it.
All right, for our cold open, Wolf Blitzer interviews Dr. Fauci and, that other lady about the COVID vaccine. And once again this week, no cameos. They must have heard the cries of the masses, and they're keeping it to the cast. So, Jason, tell us, was this cold open a win?
I think it was a win. Yeah. It was a little bit long, but I feel like it set up jokes really well.
Mm-hmm.
And, Kate McKinnon, I love her Fauci. And Heidi Gardner's Dr. Burks was really, really strong. But this sketch was really a delivery mechanism for jokes, and I think that some of them worked better than others, and we can get into that. But overall, I felt like it was a successful sketch.
Yeah, I thought this one was a great example of how good cold opens can be when they keep them simple and small and just strong. We didn't have an excessive amount of characters coming in. There were no gratuitous cameos. It was just, let's put 3 people in an interview and let's just put some jokes out there. And just a really clear game they were playing. And I thought that it achieved great heights with that. There's always something to be said for the excitement that happens when Alec Baldwin walks into the room, but I think this is just a really nice way to say, good job, SNL. You stuck with your cast. It was simple, it was clear, and it was really good. It was not 12 minutes long. It's what I've been asking for, and I think that they did a really good job with it. There were a lot of really solid jokes with a lot of great specificity in there. And so I was really feeling this cold open. This was a high note to start the night on for me.
Yeah, I liked that it was just 3 cast members too. I liked the simplicity of it.
Definitely. John, do you concur?
I do. Yeah, I can just mop up behind you guys and just basically sign off on all of that. 5 minutes, solid length for a cold open. It left us a lot of room in the back half of the show. The whole show clock felt like it was on track tonight. Like there was nothing that felt rushed or chopped down, or even Timothée Chalamet had 30 seconds to burn at the end of the show. So there's something to be said about keeping these things a little shorter and punchier, because if you have kind of a slow news week, or you have a very simple premise for a cold open, you might as well just take the 3 minutes of good material you've got, or 5 minutes of good material that you've got, and just roll with that, and don't try and make it more than it has to be. And that's what they did.
Right.
Your mileage may vary on the caliber of the jokes and just how funny they were. For my feeling is that a lot of it was, pretty easy, well-tread territory. So I don't feel like they were doing anything spectacular, but I felt like this was competent. I like a cold open that feels like an SNL cold open, rather than, the big 14-minute sprawling debate sketch, with all the walk-ons and all the rest of it. So sometimes modesty feels right. And I think it was the right choice for this show. And for that, I got to call it a win.
Definitely. So we're feeling good coming out of the cold open.
Absolutely.
And let's get into the monologue, where Timothée reminds us of the beauty and a little bit of horror of Christmas in New York. So Jason, did you enjoy Timothy's first ever SNL monologue?
Well, first of all, going back to my Dana Carvey nostalgia, it was it was really cool to see that Timothée Chalamet's mother has been on Saturday Night Live before, in the massive head wound Harry sketch. That was really cool. I was surprised to learn that this was Timothée Chalamet's first Saturday Night Live hosting gig. For some reason, I had assumed that he had done it before. But I thought he did really well in the monologue. I thought the monologue was funny. I liked the New York Christmas bit. I liked him talking about playing hide and go seek in Grand Central and never seeing his friends again. Eating Cheetos on the F train and all of that. That was really great. I kind of wondered, how well that works to people who, are not from New York and not as familiar with New York City. But he's a New York kid, so you can kind of see the reason for that. And right. I thought it worked. I thought it had some funny jokes. I thought he did really well.
Yeah, Mulaney episodes also tend to be a little New York centric, and you sort of wonder how they play to people that don't live here. But I thought they did a pretty good job with Timothy's in that it was some New York specifics, but it wasn't anything so particular that anyone who's visited knows, what the Chrysler Building is, or that, they've probably checked out Grand Central and seen how
Sure.
sprawling it can be. So I think that for the most part, it probably wasn't lost on a lot of people, but it's definitely something I always wonder about too. I really liked this monologue. I thought Timothy is a very charming young guy, isn't he?
Yeah.
He won me over just immediately. I just couldn't wait to see what he had to say. He seemed like he was having a good time, which I'm always here for. And the Cheetos joke in particular was really strong.
Nothing like eating Cheetos on the F train on Christmas Eve. You eat a handful, then you hold the pole, then you lick your fingers.
And then it was nice to see Pete kind of come out and be like kind of the other young guy and pat him on the back and say great job. That was just like a nice little moment.
Yeah, it was. I liked how they paired them, and obviously, we saw that throughout a lot of the rest of the show.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the two of them had good on stage chemistry together.
Yeah, I thought this was pretty strong monologue, John. Your thoughts?
I was coming into this only really knowing Timothée Chalamet from Chloe Fineman's impression, which I think may have worked in my favor because that's so over the top and so zany that anything that he did was going to feel subdued by comparison.
Mm-hmm.
But what I was actually kind of surprised by was how much of Timothée Chalamet's monologue I felt was a really good impression of Chloe Fineman's impression. Right? Like, it spoke to how good her impression was at finding the funny and just going bonkers with his little mannerisms and his constant laughing at himself, his awkward, I've done an oopsie and I'm going to kind of giggle it off thing that he does.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that I was already primed to see every little one of those when Timothée Chalamet did it made them hilarious to me. Like I was seeing Timothée Chalamet, the person, but he kind of felt like a caricature of himself because of how I'm coming at it, which just is just a weird way into, your first experience with an actor. But what I can say is that I think he handled himself really well. He had poise and confidence. The stream of consciousness at a piano thing, we've seen that before. It's a fairly easy bit to give to someone, but you still have to have a measure of charm to pull that off and to make yourself really likable doing that. And I thought he did. At the end of this, I'm like, I like Timothée Chalamet. I might actually go watch one of his chick flicks because he seems to. Now I get why all of our mothers are having sex dreams about him. So I really liked the energy that he was bringing to the monologue.
All right, well, another big win. Let's move on to the Rona family Christmas, where things get tense when the rebel son wants to join the radical Antiva. So, Jason, tell me what won about this sketch for you?
So I think that the game is clear, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I like that. And it played, the sketch played the game very well and very consistently. I initially was a little bit skeptical of how this was going to work for me because I was like, oh, coronavirus comedy. I just don't know if I can do it.
Right.
But I let the individual jokes and the beats that were set up throughout kind of win me over.
Yeah. This one for me was just chef's kiss. Amazing. I loved it. I thought it was a really fun take on that tired coronavirus comedy, genre.
Mm-hmm.
And just what a fun idea to have a family of coronavirus and just map standard holiday drama on them. This was so full of fantastic mapping and puns. Plus, I thought the execution of the head case things was pretty cute and funny. So this was great. I mean, Dancing with the Stars, every pun they threw in there was just so top notch. I really, really liked this one. And I thought, like Jason said, the game was super strong and they played it well. They heightened it perfectly. Huge win for me.
Agreed. Yeah. At this point in the show, when this happens, I'm feeling like, wait a minute, this episode feels so much like SNL to me. We had a modest cold open that just kind of recapped the news of the week without, any huge spectacle. And then we have a sketch like this that is half sight gag, half wordplay, half puns. And I'm like, am I watching, vintage early 80s SNL fare? Like that's kind of what I was pulling from it. Where they were okay to have these kind of gimmicky sketches that hung on, one of those really obvious conceits, like, everyone's coronavirus. And I liked it. It could have gone either way. If the writing hadn't have been sharp, then this would have gotten old so quick. But, herpes always seems to show up when you're stressed out. Like they
That's a great joke.
Yeah, they wove so much great stuff that fits with the world that they built that makes sense when these characters are delivering it as coronavirus. Just inspired a really, really fun angle on coronavirus that I thought the dialogue and the writing really propped up nicely.
Yeah, I think that what really did it, what made this the game of the sketch successful was getting you're seeing it from the perspective of coronavirus, right? Like,
Yes.
2020 was such a great year.
Yeah, lots of great specifics and some really sharp writing in this one for sure.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's keep going. It's a December to remember when Nathan surprises his wife with a Lexus that they can't afford. So, Jason, good commercial parody. What'd you think?
This was a big win for me. I loved this sketch. I mean, maybe it's because I hate, Christmas car commercial, and to see them spoof it so perfectly with, the wife being like, "What are you doing? We can't afford this."
Right.
It was, and watching this guy, Beck Bennett's character just spiral. It was fantastic. And it looked like a Lexus commercial. It was shot and framed and lit just like, any other Lexus commercial that you would see on TV. And I think that made, the contrast with the jokes really like land very well.
Yeah,
definitely. The first 45 seconds of this, if you could easily think was a real Lexus commercial before it takes that turn. And that's just the amazing production department at SNL. They always nail their commercial parodies, and it's so impressive because every commercial has such a specific feel, right? There's the car commercial, and then they'll do commercials for all different things that have different feels and be able to nail each one of them. And it's very impressive. And that always enhances their commercial parodies so much. And I thought this was one of the stronger ones. And what's really interesting is that it's not necessarily the most unique joke. I think it's something that's a pretty common thing that I think people have observed about those commercials is a car's a big purchase that you should not surprise someone with.
Right.
Definitely not the first time I've heard that, but they executed that observation into a sketch so well that it still worked. And they found really fun places to go with it with, kind of now the wife's kind of doing some shady stuff, and then having the neighbor comes in. It turns out he loaned him the money. They found really good places to go, so it didn't just rely on that one thing that a lot of us have maybe heard before. And I think that is what helped the sketch along. And then add in that amazing production, and it's a huge win.
Shout out to Paul Briganti. He directed this, so if you guys liked what he was laying down, he was the guy. But also written by Streeter Seidel. And Beck Bennett, and Fran Gillespie was in the mix on that one. So
feels very streetery.
Yeah. We get a lot of these twist on something wholesome kind of sketches from Streeter. Beck Bennett is at his best when he is knee deep in a midlife crisis.
Mhm.
This feels like a sister sketch to the Boop It sketch from a season or two back. Do you guys remember that, where the dad's watching the kids have like some sort of after school Boop It session, and you're quickly realizing that the dad is like, he's divorced, he's depressed, he's unemployed, he's just a schlub with nothing going for him. And you see his world start to unravel. And then Heidi Gardner as the I'm just not having any more of your crap mom, bursts in to take the kids. This felt like it was in the same universe as that. And I just really love it. I love it when you take something like caustic and try and mash it into something that's like wholesome holiday fare. That always works for me. And I think Streeter Seidel is really the king of that. I just really think that they took everything that these characters could bring to it, and they all just found wonderful things to add to this horrible situation. And I lapped it all up. I thought this was really, really fun.
Yeah, I think that the moment where this sketch really won me over, because Catherine, you're right. Like, it's not an original, joke to be like, people can't just afford to give, their spouses cars on Christmas. Like, when it like really got good for me was the moment where you find out that this guy lost his job and he says, well, coronavirus really, it's been hard on everyone. And then you find out he lost it the year before.
Right.
Like, okay, that's perfect. And then you really start to see it spiral for him.
Right. Yeah. That's kind of the first turn that they added something on to the original joke. And you're like, okay, yeah, this is going places. All right. Well, so far, I think we're all feeling pretty hot on this episode, so let's keep going. The Dionne Warwick welcomes several young celebrities on her show, even though she has no idea who they are. So, Jason, how'd you feel about the Dionne Warwick talk show?
I really liked the Dionne Warwick talk show. I don't know that I have ever actually seen someone do a Dionne Warwick impression, but I was like, oh yeah, that's Dionne Warwick. And really nailed kind of the tone. I don't know if you guys follow Dionne Warwick on Twitter these days, but really kind of caught that, earnest, semi-clueless, older lady, on Twitter tone. Right. And yeah, there were a lot of great jokes. The impressions of the guests were pretty good. Some of them a little bit more fleeting than I would have liked to see a little bit more of Pete Davidson's Machine Gun Kelly, which seemed to last for like 2 seconds.
Right.
But overall, I thought that this was a successful sketch.
Yeah, I have kind of a lot of thoughts on this one, and you started to touch on one there, Jason, of that. So it starts off, it's the Dionne Warwick talk show, which is not a thing that exists.
No.
Not like the Drew Barrymore talk show, which
at first I'm like, oh, I missed this, so this might go over my head a little bit. But then it turns out that it's not a parody of the Dionne Warwick show, because it doesn't exist. It's actually going to be an impression wheel sketch. And I like impression wheel sketches, but this is sort of an interesting way to do it, right? Because it's kind of taking you in a lot of different directions. You're like, okay, it's a talk show parody. Okay, now it's all impressions. And so I sort of got a little lost in that. And like you, I'm sort of thinking, some of these are just a little too fleeting. There's more room to go with this. And, there's room to have Timothée Chalamet as Harry Styles and Chloe Fineman as Timothée Chalamet on screen together. And that can be really funny.
Right.
And so I was left a little wanting of them to lean into one or the other here. So more Dionne Warwick or more impression wheel. So it kind of had a lot of working against it, but at the same time, it's all really funny stuff. So like, I'm not even really feeling like it's middle of the road.
Yeah.
It's sort of like it's sailing pretty high despite these things, where I feel like if they had made stronger choices, it could have gone even higher and been even better than it was. So I'm a little mixed on it, but it's still definitely a win. I just wish they would have done more of one thing or the other.
Okay. See, I didn't peg it as an impression wheel sketch. I pegged it as you can't teach an old dog new tricks, so more of a fish out of water type of situation.
Okay, that's fair.
I see Ego, this is a vehicle for her Dionne Warwick. And I think the impetus was just more along the lines of Dionne Warwick's trying her best to get on board with Twitter, but she just isn't getting it. And I think that's a great enough starting point to build this sketch. And I think what they came up with was good. And if you aren't looking for it to be an impression wheel, then having Pete Davidson sort of walk on and walk off as quickly as he came, it doesn't feel like a liability. It just feels like we're trying to stay out of the way of Dionne because all the good lines are Dionne's. All the gags rest in Ego on this. So I was happy to throw back to Ego, let her do something else that just proves how just ineffectual she is as a Twitterati. So I thought that if you frame it in those terms, that it worked really, really well. And I think that Ego just knocked it out of the park with her impression, with her singing, and just really staying in control of that character throughout and just making me believe it. And I thought that this was a heck of a lot of fun.
Ego was so good in it.
Yeah.
And I never would have guessed that in 2020, Dionne Warwick would be a hysterical SNL character. But yeah, she was so funny as Dionne Warwick. And I really liked the beat where they were going over to the kitchen for the cooking segment, and she just keeps singing and grabs a bite and walks off.
Because she only knows how to do one thing. She's a diva. She only knows how to break into song.
Yeah.
So you put her in any situation, she's just going to fall back into the things that she's confident in doing. And I think that makes the sketch even funnier, that you get this context about where she's at in her career and just how she can adapt. It was really, really fun.
I think you make a good point, John, and that maybe I am framing it wrong. That's because it's all about Dionne and these young celebrities that she doesn't really understand.
Yeah.
And I think maybe on a different episode, that wouldn't have occurred to me. But the fact that I went into this wanting to see what Chloe and Timothy were going to do is what made me sort of feel that way of like, no, but I want more of the impressions, They
definitely blurred the lines, because you do get some really fun impressions that we could spin off a whole nother sketch into. So you're not wrong. If that's what you were gravitating towards, you'd be like, more, please.
Right.
But yeah, I felt like Ego was strong enough that I was happy to go back to her, and we'll revisit Timothée Chalamet another time. We've already seen him before, and I'm sure we'll see him again, or at least Chloe Fineman's take on him.
Right. All right. Well, that's that for Dionne Warwick. Let's get into the deeply, deeply emotional ode to a young boy's tiny horse. Now, Jason, I know you tend to like some pretty absurdist stuff. So how are you feeling about Tiny Horse?
I really liked Tiny Horse. I think that this could be a divisive sketch. I don't know if everyone's on board with Tiny Horse, but I loved the silliness of it. I really loved, the heightened emotion of Timothée Chalamet freeing the tiny horse, liberating Tiny Horse, and imploring Tiny Horse to get.
Right.
Come on, get.
Little tiny horse on his tiny legs can't go very fast. It was such a silly gag that I laughed out loud at. So yeah, Tiny Horse worked for me, but I'm eager to hear what the two of you thought.
Yeah, Tiny Horse is definitely not a sketch that is going to be widely loved. It's definitely I don't think it's the kind of humor that has an insanely broad appeal. I'm not saying it's bad or anything. I actually really loved Tiny Horse. I have no idea why. I do not know what made this work. Like, I cannot break it down for you. None of my knowledge or training prepared me for this specific sketch. there's no reason I could see what makes it fantastic aside from it's just ridiculous. But it worked. I loved it. Timothy gave us this great, earnest, dramatic take on it, and it just really sold it. And they had a cute little clay tiny horse for us, and it's just ridiculous. So I enjoyed it, but I have no thoughts on why. John, what do you think?
When this sketch concluded, I was thinking to myself, wait a minute, is this like the strongest first half of an episode we've had so far this season? And I think Tiny Horse clinched it.
Yeah.
This to me felt so good. And again, it was really hard to pinpoint what it is that makes sense about this or what works or what's reeling you in. But I was so charmed by it. It reminded me of what Julio Torres used to do. Like, this isn't as, space cadet kind of stuff that Julio Torres did, but it had the same kind of like, there's nothing specific that you can point to that this is obviously aping. This is just something that says this is a fun thing to explore. And we're just so confident that this is gonna win you over that we're just gonna go with it. It doesn't have to make sense. Just come with us and feel something. And I did. I felt like there was, like the children's fair from the 80s. There was a lot of stuff like Black Beauty or even something like Indian in the Cover. Like there's movies where the whole point of the movie is it's kind of coming of age. It's kind of Charlotte's Web. It's just kind of like coming to terms with like the circle of life and having to let go of things and just, something about that.
There's something precious about it.
Exactly. Right. They're tapping into something so sincere and so like poignant and heartfelt, but what's up on screen is so ridiculous that how do you not laugh at the claymation horse? How am I feeling things for this little horse? And yeah, that wide shot of get out of here. And then the wide shot of how slowly the horse is moving across frame. Like Stephen Castillo and Dan Buell had to have been able to see that in their head to know that there was something here that you could hang a sketch on. And they figured it out. They figured out how to take a very absurd idea that is really hard to tack down and figure out why it's funny and create visuals that supported that. And I loved every minute of it. I want these kind of more challenging, out of the box kind of like, why am I laughing at this kind of sketches? I don't want the same old stuff. I like it when they challenge you to just go on a ride.
During that first Tiny Horse chorus, I made a mental note to check the credits to see, was Julio back this week?
Yeah, exactly.
Because it really felt Julio Torres. But yeah, I guess Steven and Dan are taking on that absurdist mantle to give us this kind of stuff.
Yeah, and Hannah Levy and Adriana Robles directed. So for the visuals, we gotta recognize their contributions too.
Loved the idea of Tiny Horse riding off on a big horse.
Yes. Yeah. Great capper on a really fantastic sketch. And you're right, John. This is a super strong first half. Even though, I didn't think Dion was as fantastic as she could have been, I still really loved it. So this is definitely a great episode so far.
Yep. Having a lot of fun.
All right. Let's talk about Bruce Springsteen and the E Street Band performing Ghosts and I'll See You in My Dreams. John, I'm going to let you go first on Bruce Springsteen. What'd you think?
I don't have a lot to say. I like Bruce Springsteen. I like the E Street Band. I love me some straightforward garage rock. Like, there's nothing pretentious about it. It's just, exactly what you're getting with Bruce Springsteen and he delivers. These are catchy tunes with some crunchy guitar and a little bit of sax when you need some sax in your rock music. Like, there's just nothing that doesn't work for me with Bruce Springsteen. So I'm not going to dig deep on it just other than to say this is a booking that I'm totally on board with.
Yeah. The boss will be the boss, right? Exactly. This is as Bruce Springsteen can get. Nothing unexpected here, but totally enjoyable.
Absolutely.
I like the second song a little more than the first. I think it's a little more up my alley, I guess. But one thing that was definitely working for me in the first song is the 6'4" tall drink of water and the tight pants sax player. I enjoyed, I mean, he's no Clarence, but I didn't mind the sax player, the new guy.
Sure.
So definitely good, and I'm a Springsteen fan, so I'm here for it. Jason, what'd you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I love Springsteen too. And these are songs off of his new album, which I haven't listened to yet. But so, I was hearing these songs fresh, and I liked the first song better than the second, so I'm a little, on the other side of that from you, Catherine.
I mean, I'll allow it.
But listening to that song, it felt very like vintage Bruce.
Sure.
I could imagine that song being on, Born to Run or one of those early albums. I thought it was great. Bruce is in his 70s now. All of those guys, most of them he's been playing with for decades, and they just sounded fantastic, I thought.
Yeah, they're so in tune with each other. They make it look so easy,
Mhm.
But yeah. All right. Well, high marks on Bruce. Let's get into Weekend Update. Jost and Che discussed the Supreme Court's dismissal of election fraud cases. Jason, how'd you feel about Weekend Update?
I thought it was okay. I wasn't like, super hot on, this week's update. Some of the jokes were a little hit or miss for me. I didn't write down a ton of them. I thought that Che, in particular, had a lot of really funny jokes. Che had the joke about Moderna vaccine being one of his favorite Tyler Perry characters.
That's a good one, yep.
That made me laugh out loud. And comparing Attorney General Bill Barr to a grown-up Eric Cartman was really funny.
Yeah, that the Cartman joke sort of was my biggest thing of note here, and that's kind of a setup that felt a little more Joesty. He usually does the intro where, and I've talked about this before, where he introduces the guy, throws in a little mini punchline about what he looks like, and then continues on into the joke. And
Mike
so
Pence, who looks like a polar bear that went to work. Yes,
exactly.
Yeah.
So it was interesting to see Che kind of do that setup for once. That stood out to me. But overall, I thought this one was off to a little bit of a slow start. Ultimately, it was fine, but definitely not a super strong update as far as just the desk pieces go. John, what did you think?
Yeah, I think this was a step back for Jost and Che. I don't know how much of that I lay at the feet of the audience and how much I lay at the feet of Jost and Che, because again, I felt like they weren't getting a lot of love, where on a regular week in a non-COVID situation, they'd be getting a lot more energy and things feeding back from the audience that would help get these over. So I feel like that kind of saps their confidence a little bit, and just makes it harder for them to really take big swings. So I do feel like this suffered, and it had its moments, but I do think it's one of the weaker opening salvos from Jost and Che that we've seen. That said, I mean, they were still batting maybe 500. Like there was still some good stuff in here. I did laugh. I'm really starting to feel that the audience is making this more challenging for them than it needs to be. I don't know what the solution to that is, other than just roll out that vaccine. But for now, anyways, it still feels like Weekend Update's taking a big hit in this new format for SNL.
Yeah. There were a few jokes from Che in particular that I thought were pretty strong jokes, and the audience gave him absolutely nothing.
Exactly.
So that did stand out.
Yeah, and hopefully, just with time, as things get back to normal, maybe we'll see that they can kind of shed that extra anxiety of not really having as much from the audience to help make these jokes shine a little bit more.
Let's talk about our first feature, though. Dr. We Notice is back to discuss the many uncertainties of the COVID vaccine. So, Jason, did you catch the first Dr. We Notice?
No, I didn't. This was my
Okay.
first exposure to Dr. We Notice.
Okay, so I'm very interested to hear your take then.
I mean, look, any time that you allow Kate McKinnon like space to just play, her comedic muscles are so strong that
Mhm.
it's hard for Kate to blow a character,
Right.
and it was fun to watch her play around with Dr. We Notice. I felt like at times there were moments where I felt like it was going on a little bit long, and that the joke was getting a little thin. But ultimately she would end up doing something or saying something that I felt like pulled it back up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I loved Dr. We Notice the first time. It was a shining moment, still probably one of my highlights of the season. Yeah, I thought it was fantastic. Dr. We Notice doesn't work as well the second time because the joke, the joke is We Notice, but the
Mhm.
big turn, the big payoff is the Kate, are you okay? The breaking and then Kate going on a little thing.
Mhm.
And that was just so delightful the first time, and they played it so well the first time. And then this time they didn't change anything, really. So, and I said the first time, I said, I do think there's a way for Dr. We Notice to come back. And I stand by that. But you got to change it up or wait a long time, right? So it's only been, this is what, episode 8? So it hasn't been very long since we saw it the first time. So it's still fresh. They didn't give us enough time to really miss it.
Mhm.
And then I think it's important, if you're not going to wait a long time, to find a new way to get that twist in there. You have to surprise us in a different way the second time, and I think there are some good ways that they could do that, but they didn't. So it is, I think there's something to say for, a lot of people don't watch every single episode religiously. And I think that was something that one of our patrons even mentioned last week with Lanny, that it is interesting to hear from someone. So, it's a recurring sketch, but what did they think of the sketch not knowing where it came from?
Mhm.
So Dr. We Notice probably works really well for people who didn't see the first one, but I do wish they had given us a little something fresher with it.
Mhm.
John, what did you think?
I think exactly what you thought. Yeah, it is interesting, Jason, to get the take of someone that doesn't have any baggage from the first outing, where you kind of know what to expect. That's interesting because there wasn't anything wrong with this. They were all having fun on screen. But when you know exactly where it's going and they don't surprise you and they follow the same beats, it can't help but feel a little deflating. And this character, because it hangs so much in just kind of the gag of Kate's character that just always uses that word.
Mhm.
Uh, you can only do that so many times before that runs out of steam. And I feel like the audience wasn't helping her at all either. Similar to like with Jost and Che, it felt like the audience wasn't really ready to just go all in on Dr. We Notice.
Yeah, and as this being my first exposure to this character, I noticed the lack of energy from the audience.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And now it makes me realize, like, oh, okay, the audience knew where this was going. The audience wasn't being surprised, and that's probably a big part of why they weren't giving that much energy back.
It's a lot harder to commit to purposely breaking when the audience is not seemingly enjoying it. It feels more awkward. So, yeah, definitely not for a lack of trying on Kate's part. But Jason, I definitely recommend the first one. It was fantastic, and I think you'll be able to see that difference in the energy from the audience.
Okay, I'll go back and check that out.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's talk about Melissa then. She visited the desk and definitely not just as a vehicle for her Dolly Parton impression. So, Jason, what'd you think of Melissa's feature?
I'm a sucker for Melissa Villaseñor. I think she's a wizard, with her impressions. It was fun to see her all dollied up. And not a surprise that she has a really great Dolly Parton impression. So I really enjoyed it. I liked it a lot.
Yeah, I love this bit. We've seen Melissa do it with, I think, Lady Gaga before, where she's
Right.
I'm just Melissa doing my thing. I'm not just using this for my impression. And I think that's a really fun little bit that, it plays to Melissa's personality a lot. She's a very playful, kind of goofy, fun person. So I think that really speaks to her, and I love that about it. And it's just a fun bit. Then to, on top of that, have a stunning Dolly Parton impression. I mean, my God, how good can an impression be?
Totally.
Melissa's always great, but I mean, this one, I think I saw her do it on Instagram a week or so ago, and I thought, how? Like, it is above and beyond any other vocal impression that she does, and all of them are good, so that says a lot about this one. So I had so much fun with this, and just huge props to Melissa on just amazing impressions.
Ditto. This felt so good. We don't see enough of Melissa, so when she gets a moment to shine and just really be front and center and just do her thing, how can you not eat it up?
Right.
She's so adorable, just naturally adorable. Like, even when she's delivering what seemingly should be a dark joke about running over a child, she's just so goofy and affable that you're like, oh, you couldn't possibly ever mean that. And like, you're instantly won over by Melissa. And if she couldn't back it up with just stunning vocal chops and a stunning impression, then it would be like, well, okay, you're just kind of the cast goof. But when she needs to turn it on, she turns it on and she delivers. And she delivers on a live stage and never misses a note. There's never a sour note. And it's layered into an impression. And you got to understand how hard that is to do. It's not just, I'm going to hit these notes. I'm going to sing for all I'm worth. I'm going to do it as another person, and I'm going to make it funny. And I'm going to have this vocal effect that is hard for me to control, but I'm not only going to control that, I'm still going to hit the note.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to come out of it grinning and ready to land a joke. And I love Melissa. I'm going to play the role of Steve Finn this evening and just say, I love Melissa. And I thought this was great. This was really great. And I'm happy whenever she gets a moment to do this kind of stuff.
All right, well, let's get into the back half of the show. The holiday baking championships are underway, and the cakes do not look good. So, Jason, how'd you feel about the baking sketch?
I was not in love with it. I would say that. I mean, I think that we've seen this type of sketch before. I mean, the one that comes to mind, and I don't watch SNL as religiously, perhaps as you guys do, so you can tell me if they've run this back several times before, but they did a version of this for the Eddie Murphy episode.
And I think that was the second outing of it.
Actually, I believe it was the third. Don't quote me, but I think this is the fourth outing, but it's the third or fourth.
Yeah, and I really liked it in that Eddie Murphy episode. And for some reason, it maybe because it just felt like a retread, it wasn't clicking for me. I felt like, it heightened, super fast with the first cake, and then you get the very strange chocolate cake with the puckered top, which totally grossed me out, as intended, I'm sure. I don't know. None of the jokes were really connecting for me. So I'm eager to hear what you guys thought.
Yeah, this one, same thing as Doctor We Notice a little bit. We've seen it 3 to
We
4
notice.
times. And we,
Yeah.
we notice sketch.
Yeah.
That's a good one, John. And
I have my
so
moments.
I can't fault this specific iteration for any reason other than I knew exactly what was going to happen. I think if I hadn't seen the others, this would have been great. And I do think that they do a good job of finding new inventive ways to spice up that second beat. The second contestant, it's always different. Today it was booty hole. Last time, I don't remember what exactly. I think it was a vomiting thing. So they are adding. They're doing new stuff with it, and I think they're doing creative new stuff with it. But it is beat by beat the same thing. So it wasn't really working for me because I knew what to expect. But I can't fault necessarily the writing or anything on it, if that makes sense.
No, it makes perfect sense.
Yeah. What do you think, John?
I agree with you guys. This one feels like it's living in the shadow of the other ones. I feel like, well, for starters, the Eddie Murphy one, I'm sure, has ruined me for any other outing of this because I got to see that one in studio. And so, like when you have that in the back of your mind, setting such a high bar just emotionally, nothing else feels quite right to see anyone else on that set. I think this one could have got over if when they get to the point where the butthole starts to do what the butthole do, if they'd mind that, pun intended, for more humor. But I think they were just counting on the visual of the volcanic eruption to carry that. And I think they needed more like fun lines. Like if Timothée Chalamet was like, I think there's a gerbil in here, or I lost my watch, or like if there was just, if they just really kept going with that and drove home exactly what you're not seeing.
Because they started to with like Heidi saying like, I think I see corn.
Yeah, and he shuts her down. He's like, you got a dirty mind or whatever. But I feel like in the other sketches, they hung on that and they found a lot more jokes in it. Like, especially when you had the one cake that was demon possessed.
Yeah.
They went all, reverse talking and just all of this, heightened horror language. You just didn't get any of that kind of payoff with this gag. So I think that they really needed to shoot higher if this was going to live up to what the other ones did. So that's where I think it kind of fell apart. But just because it stuck so closely to the other scripts, even just the progression through the contestants, exactly when you're going to get to the cake that should be the winner that nobody cares about, like, so you know that they're going to end on a phallic joke. So it just really feels like we're just walking down that same road, and that's never as satisfying the third or fourth time.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of sketches are super, formulaic, and I think that you really need very original, specific, punchy jokes to make those sketches really land and kind of rise above the, the structure that they have. So that's what, that was one of my issues with this sketch.
That's exactly right.
All right. Well, let's keep going though. Where Guap Lord and Smoke Cheddar the Asgetta hold their own on a panel of renowned hip hop stars, including a cameo from Questlove. So, Jason, how'd you feel about this one?
I liked it. This was a good, comeback sketch after the cake one. Felt like, the show kind of, pulled itself back up. It was great seeing Questlove in this sketch. And the contrast between the, older, more experienced, more grounded hip hop, experts, and these insane TikTok, rappers, played by Pete and Timothée Chalamet. I thought it was a really funny contrast.
Yeah, this was another high point of the night for me. I thought it was really great, spoofing on Gen Z TikTok mumble rappers. And
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Tim and Pete did a great job at it too. Like, I mean, was Pete just born to yell skirt, skirt? You know,
You could tell he was having so much fun.
he was, you know, they just let them be goofy and make fun of, you know, their peers a little bit. And I think it really paid off. A lot of fun places to go with this. And every time they went on a yeet tangent, I was just laughing so hard. So this one was a big win. I thought Questlove did a great job. And when he pulls the comb out and slaps Timothée Chalamet across the face with it, what more could you ask for? I mean, come on, that is comedy. So yeah, loved it. John, how'd you feel?
Yeah, if I ever wanted to pay off in a sketch, it's absolutely to have Questlove, Cold Cock, some stand-in for Little Pump. Like that that will get any sketch over in my books. This is brilliant. Yeah, any hip hop artist that actually knows how to play an instrument, watching these poser, just weak ass up and comers try and co-opt their passion, their genre. Yeah, to put them in the same room and watch sparks fly, that's great. That's absolutely great. Punky Johnson,
yeah,
I think really did a fantastic job as Queen Latifah. I was definitely buying her performance there. And that's one of the few times we've had Punky front and center, like really just taking a character and inhabiting it. So I just wanted to draw a little attention to that's a good moment for her. And just overall, yeah, this is fun. You've got old school hip hop, and then you got whatever the hell is happening on TikTok. Who wouldn't want to wring the necks of these kids that I'm sure are getting filthy stinking rich off this stupidity? That's where me as a crotchety old man weighs in on all this. Maybe other people had like a totally different take on the dynamic, but yeah, I'm more than happy to see the artist that I knew growing up be just as completely bewildered and upset with the stupidity that's happening in that genre today. I loved it for that. And there was good comedy to be had. And Questlove, if you're going to have a cameo in a show, why not? He loves the show. He's there practically every week. You know, like he's just, I'm sure that he's always just like, hey, you know, put me in, coach. Like I'm part of the family here at 30 Rock. Yeah. Like I'd love to participate. And they found something that was a really good fit for him. And of course he's going to be game. And just happy to see it. This felt really good.
My resident young person friend, Hannah, who is in this generation and age group, she did love this. So it wasn't just for us folks making fun of the youths. They laugh at themselves a little bit. So
I think that one of the things that made the sketch work too was kind of building the frustration from Latifah and Questlove.
Because they're trying to be open-minded, right?
They're trying. Yeah. They're really trying. Yeah. They're really trying. You know, like, oh, you're talking about the party aspect, the community and like then having the other. Yeah. It really gave justification when Questlove, smacked him with the hairbrush.
Yeah. I was definitely feeling that moment of violence. Like I was living vicariously through that and just, right on, Questlove. By all means, have at it.
All right. Well, continuing on to our last sketch of the night, Sports Max. It's Fox News for Jets fans. Jason, are you a Jets fan and how'd you like it?
I am not, but I know some Jets fans, and this is not far off, actually, for Jets fans. But I loved, I thought that this sketch did a really good job of, mapping that, Newsmax, denying reality point of view onto sports and weather. And I thought that it was it was loaded with good jokes. I thought again that Pete and Timothée Chalamet together, good duo. This sketch was a win for me.
Yep. Yeah, this is a really good sketch that's had some great performances in it. Especially, I loved Timothy and Pete's thing. It's written well. It's mapped really well, sort of onto the election,
Mm-hmm.
and that denying of, but when the votes first came in, they were ahead, and all of a sudden Buffalo has all these points out of nowhere. And they did a really good job of it. I can't fault anything about it in that sense, except for the fact that it doesn't feel super topical to me anymore. It feels like a sketch that came a couple weeks too late. So I still like it. It's a really good sketch, and it's a really strong sketch. And so in a way, I'm a little bit sad that we didn't get it a few weeks ago when I felt like it was a little bit more relevant.
Mm-hmm.
But that said, it's not that it's totally irrelevant now. This is still very much going on. It just feels, I guess, the height of its relevance, I feel like, has maybe passed just a little bit. So that took away from it for me a little bit. But again, like I said, really strong sketch otherwise.
Oh, there might be half of your country that might not feel like it's as passe as you do. I agree with you guys just about finding the obvious comparison between team sports and politics, right? Like, some people are just going to stand by their team no matter what, and they're going to do whatever mental gymnastics are necessary to just stay on board and rally for their team. And that's absolutely true of politics. I didn't see it as passe, Catherine, just because there's still enough going on. Like, even if
Right.
the left has fully embraced Biden and they're just full speed ahead to inauguration, that's not the whole country. So I like that Brian Tucker was able to tap into that and recognize that there's still something to be said there.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it was a smart way to set it up at the beginning, to take Newsmax, turn it into Sportsmax, and then also find a team that it takes an incredible amount of self-delusion to be willing to stay on board with, right? Like he found the right team to map that onto. So this is smart. There was a lot of good stuff going on here. I think I like the concept and the premise more than I liked the actual execution of it. I found it smart, but I wasn't falling over laughing with it. I just thought, oh yeah, you know what? Clever. I like what you did there. So it was more of a cerebral win than like I'm getting really heavy belly laughs out of it. But still, I think a totally worthwhile entry for the show.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I do think it's a really strongly written sketch. So I'm glad that I'm maybe the only one feeling that way, because it does deserve to really be enjoyed, because it is good. Very good. Well, that's the end of the rundown. Let's talk about the moment of the night. John, how about you go first? What's your moment?
Oh, geez. Okay, I didn't think you were going to throw to me.
I love to throw you off at this part of the show.
This is when I figure out what my moment of the night's going to be. The first half had so many good moments. You know what? I'm going to give it to the reveal of Tiny Horse, because the first 30 seconds of that sketch is, Pa, why can't you trust me? You trust me with the hogs. You got to trust me with whatever's going on. And like, it very much is something in the vein of some sort of like rural drama, and you're not sure where it's going. And it's not until you get the big doughy eyes of this hastily made low frame rate claymation thing that you instantly fall in love with, that you're like, what the hell am I looking at? And it was that moment, that first time when we see Tiny Horse, that I'm like, okay, I'm so confused, but I'm so in love. And I got to give it to that.
Very good. I'm going to give my moment to Questlove slapping Timothée Chalamet with a comb.
Sure.
Golden. Loved it.
Yeah.
Jason, how about you?
All right. So we won't be repeating each other. I'm going to go with the joke in the December to Remember car commercial, where we learned that Beck Bennett's character has been out of work since March of 2019.
Yes.
Yep.
COVID has hit a lot of people hard, and I'm no exception.
Nathan, you got fired in March 2019. COVID had nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
It's a good moment in that turn that we mentioned.
You instantly know everything you need to know about that character. He's just a loser. And at this point, everyone's just going to heap coals on him for a minute and a half. Yep. That's the beautiful turn in that sketch. Absolutely.
Loved it. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. I laughed out loud pretty hard at that joke.
Yeah.
Very good. Let's talk about our best sketch. John, how about you?
the first half of this show had a lot of contenders.
Mm-hmm.
I thought Rona Family Christmas was clever wordplay. I thought December to Remember was just a stunningly well realized pre-tape that captured the feel of a car commercial and married it with such wonderfully caustic family dynamics. And then you have Tiny Horse, which I'm still scratching my head at why I love it so much. And it's just that it appeals to something. It scratches an itch that you never expect SNL is going to scratch.
Yeah.
And so I'm giving it best sketch because in a way, I want to feel like I'm encouraging the show to do more of this stuff. It doesn't have to make sense. It doesn't have to fit the mold. Just, sometimes just take a leap of faith that something that seems funny in your head is going to come out funny on the screen. And even if it breaks all the rules, just let it exist. And they took those chances with Julio. It seems like they're taking them with Steven Castillo. And I just want to see more of it. And Dan Bueller too. And I really want to encourage more of this stuff.
Yeah, it's something that would feel a little bit more at home on I Think You Should Leave, right?
Sure, yeah. There's definitely an absurdist quality to it, yeah.
So my best sketch is going to go to the Rona Family Christmas.
Yep.
I just think that was a great idea that they took to fantastic places and was executed really, really well. So definite high point. I really loved that one. Jason, what's your best sketch?
This was tough for me because, I think that December to Remember is such a well-executed sketch, both technically and in its beat progression. Really, really funny jokes, well-acted, all of that. But, when I think about this episode, I'm going to think about Tiny Horse.
Sure.
So I have to give it to Tiny Horse for all the reasons that John mentioned.
Yep, that's fair. It definitely is a standout because it's so funny, but also like you said, because it's not what you expect. So
it's inscrutable, and that it's so satisfying.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that's a very fair choice. Let's talk about our MVP. John, who are you going to give it to?
I think there's a case to be made for Heidi. I think there's a case to be made for Pete, but I'm giving it to Melissa because we haven't seen enough of her this season. And sometimes when you make the play, when you just knock one out of the park, that's all I'm looking for. And I was happy to see her at the desk. And I don't know, anyone that keeps close tabs on the cast knows Melissa's had a rough year. Like COVID's hit us all kind of hard. But she feels things, we're all human. And I was just really ready for her to get a big win on the show. And I love to see it. And I don't feel like it's a sympathy vote because she knocked it out of the park. If she didn't do the job, I wouldn't give it to her, but she really made the play. She really, really nailed her dolly. And I had a lot of fun with that. And just the added meta knowing that this is just something that I wanted Melissa to have. So Melissa, you're my girl tonight.
Yeah. She was also, did a great job, smaller parts, but in the Spanish influenza and as William Eyelash.
Yep.
So yeah, Melissa had a good night, and I was really glad to see Melissa, not just knock it out of the park in that one thing, but be pretty present in the episode. But I think I'm going to give it to Timothy. That's think it's his first time here, and I think he did a really, really phenomenal job. He super competent monologue that was charming and confident, and then some just great acting chops in like Rona Family Christmas and Tiny Horse, bringing us that drama, and then getting to see his silly side with stuff like the Wrap Round Table. So I think he's a host that really stood out in the sense that you're like, oh yeah, I'm seeing Timothy everywhere, and he's doing a fantastic job in everything.
He really did. He really did.
Yeah, I think he knocked it out of the park, and I can't wait to see him back again.
Oh, he'll be back.
Yeah. Jason, who's your MVP?
So I thought about Heidi and Melissa as well, but I am going to give my MVP to Ego for a really great Dionne Warwick.
Sure.
And being just super funny in that sketch. And if she were not if she were 10% less funny in it, I'm not sure how well that sketch would have worked. But I thought that she was fantastic and she carried that sketch. And so that's who I'm giving it to.
Yep.
Yeah, I feel like Echo was great from the start, but she's really coming into being an up and coming star of the show. And I've seen her embracing some promotions on Instagram too, so she's getting some attention outside of the show, and I'm really glad to see that because I think she is fantastic.
Yep.
Let's get into the big one. On a scale of classic, great, decent, weak, or train wreck, how would you rate this episode? Jason, we'll do you first.
I'm first. Oh man, the pressure is on. I would rate this a great episode. I'm not quite sure that I'm willing to give it the classic label, but this was a very, very strong episode. The cake competition being kind of the only sketch that didn't work for me, and maybe that's why I'm not comfortable giving it the top mark. But yeah, I'll probably rewatch this show, this episode at some point. And for me to say that, I think it has to be a great episode.
Definitely. I think this one is a hard great. Definitely. Or sorry. I meant that
great.
like it's an easy great, but like also it's like it's hard great. Like it's very firmly a great episode.
Solid great.
I don't know.
Yes.
Yep.
There we go. Solid's the word I needed. So it had so much working for it. I was very nearly gave it a classic. But I think Dr. We Notice and the holiday baking one kind of pulled it down. And then, like I said, I was a little bit more iffy on Sports Max. So a back half that wasn't as even as that first half, kind of kept it from being a classic. But it's a great, and it's a really, really good great. So that's where I'm landing. John, how about you?
I think it just barely gets over the line into great territory, personally. I think this episode, more than any other episode we've seen this season, to me, feels like true SNL in its pacing, in just getting what you expect to get from an SNL episode. I think we had a serviceable cold open. I think we had a monologue that makes you root for the host. I think we had a killer front half of the show where they front loaded all their best material to really just get you jazzed. We had a super competent musical guest that just always delivers. And we had a little bit of weakness in Weekend Update, and we had a little bit of weakness in the back half, an uneven back half. But is there enough material in there to make a really, really solid 1 hour outing of SNL vintage at 10 p.m.? Absolutely. And by that standard, I think you got a great episode that we're going to see in rerun rotation fairly often.
Very good. Well, I think we're all pretty hot on this episode. Timothée Chalamet did a great job, and
he will be back.
He will
seem
be
like he had so much
absolutely.
fun.
Yeah. Super strong sketches and a very fun night. So, Jason, thanks so much for being here. I loved having you.
It was a pleasure. It was great to talk about this episode with you guys.
Yeah, and once again, Jason's sketch team on Boogie Manja is called Give the Baby a Knife, and you can catch them on twitch.tv/Boogie Manja. You'll be back, you said, in February?
In February, yes.
Very
Spell good. Boogie Manja.
BOOGIMANJA.
Okay.
Is there an E in there?
Halfway through, I was not sure if I was going to be able to pull it off.
Okay, search for that, and hopefully you'll get somewhere in the realm of their stuff.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, you'll end up in the Boogie verse.
Very good. Well, that's a wrap. Thanks to Jason Wildhagen and John Murray. And thanks as well to our most generous patrons, Sam Bowers, Neil Weinstein, Justin Gardner, Carissa Eubank, and Brian Clark. If you're enjoying our show, please subscribe on YouTube or wherever better podcasts can be found. Your subscription helps us grow, and your support is greatly appreciated. We'll be back in 1 week when SNL returns with host Kristen Wiig and musical guest Dua Lipa. But until then, This has been episode number 123 of the Saturday Night Live After Party podcast. I'm Catherine Coleman. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.